Cool. So until this point, we talked about the relationship between sport and media, how they evolved, and then I showed last week about convergence media, so like this new form of understanding the existence of multiple channels or multiple media platforms. So the idea that we tell the stories in each platform and they complement each other, but at the same time they complement, they are competing for our attention, for our time. And in your assessment, you need like to create this marketing plan, this digital marketing plan, and then if you want to reach the higher band of the marketing criteria, you need to create the marketing plan using 5 or more platforms. So what I'm planning today to talk is like the notion of platformization. So how the media environment, but like also like the business models surrounding this new environment that we are, that's like very mediated, very digitized, is controlled by platforms and all the platform logic. So that's like has an impact on the way that you're going to create the content. So think on how you're going to structure your content, how you're going to use the platform to your advantage, but also how it might be a little bit detrimental for you, like to having control or what you're going to create and the length of the videos, if you're doing videos, or like what you're posting, what type of post you're doing. So the first part is like to talk about this whole change in the business environment that's surrounded by platforms like digital platforms, and especially the big 5 companies that dominate this market. And then I'm going to talk like a little bit of some of the platforms and then the positives and negatives of those platforms. So when you're writing your work, as I said, you need to like justify. So like justify why you're selecting those platforms, or justifying why you're selecting digital platforms in general at the beginning. So use those points that I'm making here in the lecture as the arguments that you need to put on your work. So why digital? Of course, we are in the digital media module, but you need to justify that. It could have been like any other channel to run your campaign. It could have been like like traditional channels like TV, newspapers, like common ads. But like, why you're using digital? What's that like provides you as something that's very important? And then the platform selection. Then today I'm going to talk, as I said, like a little bit about some of the platforms, their characteristics, and then you need to use that to your advantage. So one quote that I really like here, that's from Blakeman. That's I think the name of the book, like non-traditional media marketing, and that's the book that we are using for the next few weeks. That probably we cannot go anywhere now without being exposed to advertising. So think on how was your relationship to Facebook in the past, or maybe Instagram today. I don't know how it's TikTok. I don't use TikTok, but or like YouTube. So if you were like in the past, there would be like maybe almost no advertising there, and then it start picking up and like gradually increasing. So to a point that probably when we scroll or when we watch a video on YouTube, we're exposed to so much ads throughout our consumption. So first thing we do in the morning, we open our phone, we check something on Instagram or like TikTok, or watch a video, there will be an ad already. So we are being exposed 24/7 to ads. So again, when you're designing your digital like campaign, you need to think like how you're gonna call attention. If not, it's just like another message that people get throughout the day, and then just like disregard, scroll again, don't click. So how are you gonna make them, well, maybe stick to that content that you created, like using the concept that we discussed last week, or how they're gonna engage with that content, how they're gonna share that content, how they're gonna improve that content, or something like that. Because when it becomes like so pervasive, we just like don't even take note that they exist. We don't take note that they are there. So very similar to the argument and the point that I make about digital technologies. So they are so pervasive nowadays that we just don't even know they exist. And probably our relationship to advertising is getting on the same level. So how I have organized the lecture today is first just like to give you a brief idea, a brief overview of this transformation of the business models and our interrelationship to media in general. So what the authors call as platformization. So the transformation of everything into platform or into the platform logic. And I'm going to talk about later about that. Then a brief overview of non-traditional media. And here, non-traditional media doesn't need to be only digital and social media. There are other non-traditional media that you could use to create the campaign. Of course, not in our case here, because our case is like very digital. It's like we want to do on digital, but there are other forms of media that can be used for advertising. So like out of home advertising, so like billboards, that's one thing. You can like do on movies and product placement and so on and so forth. So there are different media or like different channels that you can use for adding uh, content. And they have like some positives and some like relate to what we are discussing on digital and social media. Then in the final part of the lecture, we're going to talk about digital media and specifically on social media platforms. And I think like specifically social media platforms because when we think of digital media, we tend to associate them with social media platforms. And those social media platforms, they are the platforms, they are the infrastructure platforms, which the authors talk about in the theory of platformization. And here I have selected a few platforms, like the ones that have like more research done. So YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Of course, if you're going to create content on other platforms, you need to find information about those platforms, what they are for, what are the positives, what are the negatives of those platforms, who use those platforms, and so on and so forth. But here's just like an overview. It's not yet about the content creation part. So it's like, why those platforms? Then we select platforms and then we create content, which is like topics that we're going to discuss later in the module. So the first thing that we need to understand about platformization is a definition. So what it means platformization. So platformization, like in a nutshell, would be like the penetration of a model, economic model, and the infrastructures behind that model into the wider digital media environment. So how one those media channels are structured. So we can think as like, okay, it's data collection, which is like the point that I make here, like about datafication. So the platforms, they emerged and they kind of like evolved in a direction that data became central. So collection of data and the use of that data for other aspects of their business model. So most of our interrelationship to media, that's very different from traditional media, which didn't have like a very clear notion about the users, like the audience. So think about a newspaper or a TV station. They might have a guess who are those users. They normally buy information, let's say from Kantar or other companies that make research about the users, the audience. But here in this new media environment, especially the platform environment, that the platforms, they have that information. They rely on that information. So the whole business model is centered around datafication, around the capture and the circulation of data. So think about, let's say, Facebook, and Apple is doing the same, and Google does the same as well. At the same, but a little bit different. With like, while Apple say that they don't use your data for commodification, but Facebook and Google, they do, and then they rely on that. Their business model is based on data and advertising, selling access to that user base, like very specific user base. But think of like that was the point I was gonna make. Is like, think of every time you're gonna log in on any other platform. Let's say you're opening an account on Strava. What are the buttons available for you to create an account? So you can like sign in with like Facebook, you can sign in now with like your Apple ID, and you can sign in with your Google account, or you can like create an account from scratch. And people tend to use like Facebook or Google, or maybe now the Apple ID. So that's a circulation of data. So when you sign in on Strava via your Facebook ID, Strava will send the information to Facebook. There will be a share also between Facebook to Strava. So like some information like your name, like age, interests, and other things. So platformization, and especially like those big 5 platforms, they control the circulation of data. They become like the big nodes, if you think in a network, that moves data around. And of course, like this, decide which data they're going to share and which data they're going to keep just for them. So at the beginning, data was something that it happened and it wasn't part of their strategy. Think about Facebook in the past. So they just had like users, people joining in, creating content. And then they start realizing, it was like, what's the business model here? So our business model is based on advertising. So connecting that audience that we know to advertisers that want eyes or like attention. And that attention is to the specific uh, individual user, because we know when she or he log in, what they click, what they don't click. And of course, if they sign in on another platform, we have like all the other information, the bits and pieces puzzled together, and you have like a very clear picture of who that person is and what are their interests. So at the beginning, a byproduct, now is central to the business model, to a point that Facebook just dropped in the stock market like 25, 30% in a day when they released their results from this quarter, because Apple changed the way they circulate data. So the data is not passing anymore to Facebook because of the privacy settings that Apple introduced in their platform, on their phones especially. So one point that we can like think about commodification is that commodification of data. So that's the most basic assumption. So everything that we do becomes data, and that data can be commodified, can become a commodity that's traded. So is your attention, is what you do, is what you click, is what you like, you don't like, your interests, hobbies, and so on and so forth. One point that we can make is that time becomes a commodity. So you're putting your time there. And here we can think of an unpaid digital labor. So when I'm creating content as a user and I'm putting work there, I'm editing a picture, or like I'm just posting, or like I'm interacting, I'm engaging with people there, I'm replying. And that is unpaid digital labor, because one, I'm creating data for those platforms, data about me, about my interactions, my contacts with others, but also I'm creating content. So there is an unpaid digital labor that's being commodified and being sold to advertisers at the end of the day. But on the other hand, we can think that platformization empowers users in the sense that they can become entrepreneurial, and they can like create content, they can become like influencers on Instagram, or they can be like advertising their houses and flats on Airbnb, like to be like Uber drivers, Uber delivery, and so on and so forth. So there are the two extremes of commodification happening and taking place within platformization. This platformization is characterized as a multi-sided economic exchange. So here on the traditional model, we have the media as the center, and we have the audience and then the advertiser. So it's like one-sided economic exchange. So you're just making a connection between one side to the other side. In the platforms, you have like multiple actors operating in that environment. So you might have this infrastructure platform, let's say Facebook, then you have another platform, which is Strava, then you have end users, so us connecting on Strava, using Strava, then you have the brands advertising on Strava, then you have uh, other entities operating in that market. So it becomes a multi-sided exchange, and the platforms, they are there mediating those interests of brands, users, other platforms, other users, governments, and so on and so forth. A really interesting point here is that for them to become successful, they rely on scalability. So more users, more advertisers, more advertisers, more users, and so on and so forth. So they need to grow. And that's why they're like so key in stressing the number of users when public traded companies, the platform ones, they talk about their quarterly earnings. So like how much they grow. So Netflix is like losing subscribers, Facebook's losing users, and so on and so forth. Like that has a massive impact because we need scalability. We need more people there, and you get more people there normally by offering this service or that product, that space for free. So we think that Facebook's for free, but actually it's not really for free because we are giving our unpaid labor. And they give also tools for free to advertisers, as I'm going to show in the next slide. So advertising in this platform economy, and especially in a platform economy that relies on data, moves from being related to the content. So let's say we're going to put an advertising on a newspaper, you select the page you want. So I wanted my advertising in the sports section, or that's with TV. I want my advertising run between the stages of, I don't know, the Tour de France, whatever. So it's about the content. And here is not about the content, it's about users' behaviors and interests. So I encourage you like to play around and do that on Facebook, or you can do on the Google as well, on their ad part. So if you create a business account on either of them, and even with a creator's account on your Instagram, you can see this because you can create your target audience based on interest. So I just put like cycling, or I can put like the region, or I can put like the behaviors. So that's how advertising becomes so key to these platforms, and that's how they're like stealing money from traditional media outlets, which don't have that specific data about users. So like what are their interests, what are their behaviors? We just like know in general that they might be watching that event or that activity on TV or whatever. So here's just like to show that there is a steady growth on advertisement expenditure online. So this might be, I would say, a byproduct or like a yardstick that reflects the growth of users online. So advertiser will go where users are because they need attention. But also it shows a decline on traditional media spaces. So we know that users are spending less time on TV, or they're buying less newspapers, physical ones, or magazines. So ad spend year might be a good yardstick to see where people are. And maybe that's one argument that you can make on your digital marketing campaign, that you need to target where people are. You're not creating a platform, you're not creating a channel, you are going where they are. So if they are on Facebook, because that's your target audience, then you need to have your campaign being run on Facebook. But if it's on TikTok, it's on TikTok. So you need to find where your target audience is. That's the first point. And then you select the platforms because you're going where they are. So those are like some free tools that those platforms like Google and Facebook, or like Meta now, offers for advertisers or for users to use advertising to create advertising. So you can understand what your users are doing, very different from if I'm a content owner and I sell that to the TV station. They might be like relying on secondary data or like research done by another company. While here I have data that's up to date, real time, and I can make informed decisions of like content. So like which blogs, and here's from my blog. So like which blog posts are performing better, and so on and so forth. And here, if you have a creator's account on Instagram or on Facebook as well, a business account, you can go to the business suite, and then you can have a look on the insights. You can like run your ads. You can plan when you're going to put your posts, and so on and so forth. So again, those seem to be like free tools, but they are like just a way of both Facebook, like Meta now, and Google to increase their user base, increase like scalability. So like you have the users and you have the advertisers. You're like trying to help both sides. And here, in terms of selection, is quite important to take note about the notion that, different from traditional media that operate with like the editorial logic, here we have an algorithm logic. So what kind of content are going to be shown to users? So one is based on personalization. So based on data that you have generated before, there will be like a predictive uh, based on the algorithm that you might engage better with that kind of content. That's why you're going to be seeing that ad, or that's why you're going to be seeing that post now on Instagram. That nowadays is not on the time frame anymore. It's like more on the algorithm way of organizing. Others way of like selection of content through like reputation and trends. And then reputation, you can think on two ways as well. So maybe there is on Uber is like a good example where you can like rate the drivers, but like drivers rate you as well. You have on Airbnb similar features. So you might see or you might rank the ones, you might filter what you see on the platform based on the reputation of the users in both ends of that platform, or on trends that are created through the user engagement on that platform. And the last one, and there's like a big discussion always, like why, like let's say racist abuse still like happening on those platforms, why they don't take those content out. Now I just like share a tweet about that Spotify podcast from Joe Rogan that's not on Spotify apparently, that was removed or disappeared today. But is moderation, so like the content is moderated. Those platforms that are content agnostic, they don't care much about the content. Whatever content you put is content because it's scalability. But there are some content that falls out of the terms of service. So if the platform deems that content to be out that terms of service, then you're going to be removed. But that terms of service is different from what we think that that's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. It's a complete different like space or environment if you want to put like that. So those are like the three main ways that platforms select what kind of content appear or not. So to reemphasize, is a multi-sided market, and a multi-sided market that tries to appease the interests of all the different user base, from advertisers to end users to content creators to professional content creators to amateur content creators if you look at YouTube, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, the power, because it's the one that collects and decides which data moves or not, resides with that infrastructure platform, especially those big five companies. So maybe it gets to a point that if you know that your content gonna just appear because of those platform selection features and the power that the platform has, is that you're gonna start creating or like you start consuming your cultural content based on the logic of that platform. So think about YouTube, and then that's the research I did on the Paralympics now, is that the Paralympics on their YouTube channel, they're increasing the length of the video. So now videos like the younger videos, like the videos that have been posted for the past few years or like the past few months now, they are longer than the average video. And that's because the platform is moving towards that direction. So longer video formats. So maybe that's the differentiation between YouTube and other platforms, like say TikTok and Instagram. They're looking for short video content that is also vertical. So YouTube's trying to position itself to like the horizontal alternative to TV and longer video formats. And if that's the platform logic, then you need to adapt your content creation to that logic. And of course, like how you consume is becoming dependent on the selection the platform makes. So there's like very, very strong power in the platforms deciding how and when we do consume and how the content is also created. So the content becomes contingent to each platform. So each platform would encourage or discourage some types of content. We can maybe think of Instagram, and maybe it's anecdotal evidence, like just looking for my Instagram data here, that how many people look at my pictures. I don't know, like 500, 600 users. But if I put like those like short videos, I can't remember like the name of the video now on Instagram, there's like 2,000 that will look at that video. So Instagram TV is kind of like booming to some extent, and Instagram is encouraging creators to do more and more videos. So they want to take that audience from TikTok, which was that platform. So what you're going to post is very contingent to what the platform wants you to post. So they're going to encourage you to use one kind of content on top of the other one. So that was like the kind of introduction of the platforms, and then we're going to move more like to non-traditional media, digital and social media, and specifically those four platforms that we're going to talk later on in the lecture. So a definition from Blakeman about non-traditional media, and more or less that was how digital and social media was defined in the past as a non-traditional. So you have the traditional ones like newspaper, TV, radio. But Non-traditional media is like anything that bypasses traditional advertising or the traditional way to reach and engage with your audience. So maybe the traditional way is that very one directional. You have like that content that you put on a newspaper that's like broadcasting idea. You have a message, you have the receiver, and then you are the sender. And media is just there mediating that connection between sender and receiver. Or you have this on your TV spot. So non-traditional advertising can happen in many forms and can be like, as I said, in the billboard outside, can be like those flying balloons that go like in football games and so on and so forth that you see like in US at some point, or like in movies and stuff like that. The point that Blakeman makes is that non-traditional media can be used as complementary, but of course, if you think that audience is changing from traditional media spaces to non-traditional media spaces or to digital and social media places, so now it's not only complementary, it is essential. So the complementary might be the TV, the complementary might be those other traditional media spaces that people used to use. So if you want to reach that audience, reach that core user base that you have that are online, you need to be focusing on the online, on the digital spaces. So why non-traditional media works, and what are like the positives of non-traditional media in terms of its comparison to traditional media? So first thing of all is that it's hard for us to ignore them. So it happens already. So if I open Instagram and I scroll, it'll be there. Of course, I can like just scroll faster and past that. So it's hard for us to ignore. It's become part of our engagement with those media platforms. And as I'm gonna talk later on, if there's like still time, that the way they have incorporated advertising in Instagram, but also on YouTube, is that they start doing like very, very slowly. So maybe there was like almost none, and then there was like one, and then there was like just like really quick, and then you could like skip that on YouTube. And now on Instagram it's cluttered with like advertising. So every single 5 stories, it will be like an ad there, and then that ad is like 5 stories long. So slowly they start building that because we get used to that and we don't become critical to that over ad environment. But it becomes harder for us to ignore. It's there. They are everywhere. Because the way advertising happens in those spaces, they are more interactive, or they should have been more interactive. They are not the pitch sales style that you see on traditional ad spots on TV, newspapers, and so on and so forth. And because of that, we tend to engage more, or like click more, and feel part of that story as well. And not forgetting is that they are based on our interests. They are not based on the content in the sense that is on cycling TV program that you have like an ad running there about, I don't know, cycling as well. Well, of course, there's like a chance that if you're watching cycling, your interests are in cycling. But on social media platforms, they know exactly our interests. Thus, it kind of like links back really well to what are the other things you're watching, or like the other things that you're clicking through your consumption of Instagram or YouTube and so on and so forth. So that's why it becomes so key to select the correct platform. So find the correct platform. because the target audience is already on that platform and you need to go and target them. So you know where they are and you go and reach them there. It's not like you just like try to reach everyone in a traditional media uh, thinking, TV, broadcasting, masses, and so on and so forth. You're just like very specific, very personalized to that individual because you know he or she or they are in that space. The point here links very well to what we talked last week of convergence media, that your whole campaign needs to have a coherence. It cannot look the same. So it's the same content being shown on different platforms, because then I'm not going to watch this, I'm not going to read this, I'm not going to engage with this. But at the same time, it needs to have a coherence. I cannot open two different things from the same company and they have like completely different visual representations, different color palettes, and so on and so forth. So I need to understand that, okay, that's the same company, just like a different content in a different platform. So think about the convergence media and then how you're going to implement your digital media plan in those 5 or more platforms by way you're using the same imagery, same color palette, layout, font style. Be like very specific. Don't use like very standard ones. Like use things that relate to your brand, the ones that you have created. So people recognize you, who you are, by the style that you use across those platforms. Here you have like spokespersons here as well. So like we're going to talk later in the module about influencers. So also, who are you using? Maybe you need to have a coherence of the type of influencers, not exactly the influencer, because the influencer might speak better for that particular platform and not to another one. So you might have an esports player that are very good if you're doing like everything on Twitch, but maybe on Instagram they won't be that good because they won't be on Instagram, they won't be recognizable. So you have like another person, but that communicates the same message, like the same cultural message behind your campaign. So some of the positives of non-traditional media. So it's very focused on the customer, it's very focused on that individual. It's targetable. So if you think about an email marketing campaign, is a permission-based campaign. So you are giving permission for the companies to contact you every time that you sign up and get that voucher of like 20% to be in their mailing list, that you're accepting to receive that campaign all the time. So it's very different from like I'm turning the TV on and being like bombarded by messages. Like for me, of like I don't want to see those things. But at the same, when I opt in, when I sign in for an email marketing campaign, some of the time I'm giving consent to see that message all the time. I can unclick, unsign, and so on and so forth. They are interactive. So you need to use your campaign, you need to create your content in an interactive way. So if you're doing like a very one directional message in your content creation, and we're going to talk later about content creation in the next few lectures, that you're just using a digital environment to say the same message you could have done on TV, the same thing that you could have done on a newspaper, like just printed stuff. So you're not using the platform for what the platform is supposed to be used for, like the affordance that the platform gives you. Different from traditional media spaces, you can do in a very cheap in comparison. So if I just like open here my Instagram like creators account and create an ad, I can like pay like £10 for an ad that like you're gonna reach, I don't know, 25,000 to like 50,000 people that have those interests in that geographical area that I select. And that's £10. So that's like very, I'll say, cheap in comparison to running a campaign, a newspaper, a local newspaper, or so on and so forth. It's less waste of energy because it's very targeted. You're gonna reach that specific market, that specific individual that you want to reach. You're not like trying to reach everyone and then not reaching anyone at the same time. Nevertheless, there are some negatives to non-traditional media. And again, here, you might think that's like contradictory. I just said that budget is better, is like positive, but budget can be like a negative, depending on the media selection. So maybe if you're running a campaign on YouTube and then you're creating the content on YouTube, nowadays people expect that content to be professionally created. So you need to have like professional videographers recording, you need like people that are good in front of the screen, talking, so on and so forth. It's like depending on the platform, you might have a positive of the budget. On other platforms, you might have a negatives on the budget. So platform selection becomes key. Because the message spreads really fast, it dies really fast as well. So there is a constant need of creating messages or a constant need of creating content. And the platform logics kind of like impose that on you as well. So newness is what appears. So if I go on Instagram and start scrolling, I won't see like older things. There's like that is gone. Like that is impossible to reach those things. Either need to go to the user, then scroll down. So you need to constantly be creating new content. So maybe that links again to budget. So there is a constant need to create content. The reach, instead of like being like very wide, you're gonna be like very specific. So to some extent could be a negative here because you're gonna reach a particular user and not the masses. So if you want the masses, non-traditional media, digital media are not the way forward. And depending on the platform you select, it's hard to measure your return on investment. So like how many people have seen the billboard outside, or how many people have seen your ads inside a toilet. So like those are like non-traditional media as well. But depending, this could be like a positive, as I show you with those tools that Google and Facebook gives you. You can like see exactly how many people you have reached, and then if they have clicked there, you can see all those targets. So there are positives and negatives depending on the platform you select. So in terms of digital and social media platforms, maybe one that relate to the Web 1.0 and still is present and we're still using all the time is like websites. So websites can be part of your campaign. So if you have a website, you have a blog, that could be one channel. And why websites are good? So there are normally like 11 qualities to a website that make them a good place, a good platform, a good channel to reach customers. So one is information. Think of how you engage with websites. You normally like heavily with words. There are like lots of information you can put there. It's like those how to solve DUI things. SEO concepts, they will apply to written words. So if you search on Google, you're gonna end up on a website. So again, websites are good for information about your business, information about your products, information about how to use your product, your values, and so on and so forth. You have like blogs, as I said here. Blogs, to some extent, they create a sense of community if you offer discussion spaces. Like how many people engage with those blogs, then is another point. there's like space for that, but not many people, I believe, engage in those discussions. Blogs and pages can be constantly updated, changes, information, new products, uh, new qualities of those products, and so on and so forth that people are going to Google and end up on your website. You can cross promote web pages. So think of your campaign on Instagram or your campaign on YouTube or on another social media platform that you might have a link there, and that link is going to lead to where? To your web page. So think that maybe as the end point that you all link back to somewhere, and that somewhere normally is where you have your marketplace where you can sell that product. And the ones that have done the digital garage, you have like a whole like section on that, and also like how to make it more appealing for international markets. So like the paying systems and so on and so forth. Tech side, it needs to be like a very responsive website. It needs to be a very responsive blog. And in terms of like mobile friendly, that you saw again on the digital garage, so like AMP to the website, you can like see the same experience, have the same experience if you open on your phone or if you open on your computer. So if you want to find a definition for social media platforms, and here's like the one that Blakeman offers, is the one that the content is generated by users. And here users, we can like be very broad. So it can be like us, like normal users, or it can be like semi-amateur users, like semi-professional users, or like actually institutional users. So if you go like to YouTube, you have like all those different types of users creating content. YouTube doesn't create the content, but then it's like you or like myself with my channel here, when I share like the lectures, or that people becoming influencers, sharing things. You have like brands sharing their blogs or how to do things. And then you have the IOC, you have the Paralympics, you have like proper big brands like Red Bull and so on and so forth, having their TV channels on YouTube. So there are like a plethora of users creating content for that platform. So maybe that's like how to define social media in general. It relies on the engagement of the users to generate content. We cannot think social media is like completely distinct from the whole campaign or like the whole life. So maybe in the past, if you go like a few years back, that we could have like think that, okay, digital is different from real life, like the virtual and the real, or social media and real. But now our interactions are so weaved together between the real and the virtual, or between the platforms and the non-platforms. So the whole campaign need to have the platforms in its core. So you need to use that to your advantage. People are on those platforms. They are engaging on those platforms. They are consuming, they're creating content. So it needs to be an integral part, not something afterthought. I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'm gonna do this. So from what I'm seeing you doing, like creating content already, that first select the platforms. Have a very clear rationale for selecting the platforms, not use that as an afterthought. So the first point is selecting platforms, the right platform for your right audience. And that the right audience is the one that connects to your mission, the vision, the values of your company, people that have interest on that product or service that you're selling or like offering as a value. So platform selection is key. Don't leave that for later. Don't think about creating the content or it's like everyone's on Instagram. No, it's not everyone who's on Instagram. There are crowds in different places. So what you can use digital social media platforms in general, and I cannot go into each one of them today, like because of the time. I'm gonna catch up with this next week in the lecture. So I start from this part. So you can use like to listen and understand your target market. So what are they posting? What are they consuming? So you can use like those A/B tests as well. So you can like put like different types of content and see like what they engage with, what they don't engage with. You can like concentrate with their already loyal fan base or like already loyal user base, people that are passionate about your product, that they are following your brand. So they're accepting to receive like selling messages all the time. So if you follow a brand on Instagram, it means that you are okay to see advertising all the time. Be patient because it takes time to build one as an audience. So if you don't have an audience yet, you need to be constantly creating content to create that audience. But second is that you need to constantly create content, and then you're gonna get more engagement. So be patient, and it's a long-term process. It's not something that's like now and it's done. Quality content becomes shareable. Normally those like go viral, and then we talk about spreadability as last week. You can use like those digital platforms to find influencers who are the key users on that audience that you want to engage with. So if you find them, if they create a content for you or they advertise for you, that message looks like much more authentic than coming directly from the brand. If I am a user and I have used that product and I have like a very large audience and I share to that audience, like, okay, I really like this, I'm gonna use this, even though it's like a paid ad or a paid promotion, it's more likely that audience you're gonna engage with and you're gonna buy because they follow me, the influencer. Creative lines, they are better than facts. So don't focus on the facts, focus on like being the creative side of your campaign. You need to be there to respond. And then one of the negatives that I was going to show in the next few slides, that you might get negative word of mouth. So negative points are like spread much faster than the positive points, but you need to be there to engage with, and not engage by deleting those things, but like actually actively engaging with the points that users are making on those digital media channels that you have selected, or the social media platforms you have selected. So the last point that I'm going to make here, and then I can continue next week. Some types of content you can use on your digital media channels or like social media platform channels. And then here it seems that if you go to your Instagram and scroll or other platforms, you might identify those type of content. So you do like giveaways, contests. So let's say tag friends, share this, and then you're gonna get like a prize here. So that you're gonna reach a wider audience, and then you're gonna build an audience. So you can use this as a starting base because you want to build a user base around your social media platform. User-generated content. So ask people to tag you, and then you just share the best ones. So you don't need to have a creative team behind. So that's like the budget part. It's cheaper because you rely on the unpaid labor of your fans, of your user base. Opinionated posts, they get like lots of traction, there's lots of comments. So those call to actions, some of them, they try to link to very strong points. So is esport sport? Well, maybe like just use an example. So people are like, okay, no, it's not. So they're gonna comment, they're gonna share, and that's why Joe Rogan podcast becomes like so, you know, followed because of opinionation and controversial, debatable posts. How to ideas, how to change things, how to implement things. So you see like lots of these with like cycling, how to do things, how you set up your bike, use of humor, motivation, personal quotes, personal stories. That's like very powerful as well because it's about the human connections. So like social media platforms is like organized around networks that evolve through real human beings. So use that to your advantage. Q&A is another type of post. So I'll have to finish here, and there are like quite a few other slides to go through. I'm gonna talk about them in the next lecture because we follow with the same topic. So for the ones that have workshops this afternoon with me, I'm gonna create a link. I'm gonna be online the whole time. If you want to join me, like join. The idea is like to work on the two assessments, like or the one assessment that's like divided into. Cool. So if you have like any questions, just like stay over, and we can go over and discuss here. Okay. Thank you, and sorry for not being in person.